The river churned violently as Dorothea Grayson watched her entire life disappear beneath the murky waters, her heart sinking faster than her luggage. She stood paralyzed on the riverbank, her cream-colored traveling dress splattered with mud, her hands trembling as she reached helplessly toward the rushing current that had swallowed everything she owned, everything she had brought to start her new life in the untamed Montana territory of 1878. "No, please, no," she cried, tears streaming down her face as she stumbled forward, nearly falling into the water herself. The stagecoach driver and his companion were already downstream, attempting to retrieve the horses that had bolted when the crossing went wrong. No one seemed concerned about the young woman from Boston whose trunk, valise, and small box of precious mementos had been swept away in the accident. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the landscape as Dorothea sank to her knees in the mud. 22 years old and utterly alone, she had traveled over 2,000 miles to marry a man she'd never met, a rancher who had placed an advertisement for a bride in the Eastern newspaper. Thomas Whitfield had sounded respectable in his letters, and Dorothea had been desperate to escape the suffocating life that awaited her in Boston after her parents' deaths. Now she had nothing but the clothes on her back and a small reticule containing her remaining money and the letters from her intended. "Miss, are you hurt?" The deep voice startled her, and Dorothea turned to find a tall man on horseback regarding her with concern. His face was partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but she could see he was young, perhaps in his late 20s, with a strong jaw darkened by stubble. His shirt was dusty, his vest weathered, and a lasso hung from his saddle. My things," she stammered, gesturing helplessly toward the river. "Everything I own. The stagecoach. The water was too high." The man dismounted in one fluid motion, tying his horse to a nearby tree before approaching her. The Blackwaters running high with the spring melt, they should have known better than to attempt a crossing here. As he came closer, Dorothea could see his eyes were a startling blue against his sun-bronzed skin. He removed his hat, revealing thick brown hair, and crouched beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "I'm Jackson Forrester. My ranch is about 3 miles east of here." He glanced at the river, then back at her tear-stained face. "Were you heading to Timber Creek?" Dorothea nodded, trying to compose herself. "Yes, I'm Dorothea Grayson. I'm to be married to Mr. Thomas Whitfield." Something flickered in Jackson Forrester's eyes. "Whitfield's place is another 20 miles north." He paused, scanning the river. "The driver and his helper, downstream. The horses broke free." Jackson nodded and stood, offering his hand. "Miss Grayson, let me help you up. You can't stay here and nightfall's coming. We need to get you somewhere safe and dry." Dorothea hesitated, then placed her hand in his. His palm was calloused but his touch gentle as he helped her to her feet. Her legs felt weak, her body trembling from shock and cold. "I can't just leave," she protested weakly. "My trunk, my clothes, everything." "The current's too strong," he said firmly but kindly. "Anything that went in there is halfway to the Missouri by now. I'm sorry." Fresh tears welled in Dorothea's eyes. Inside her trunk had been her mother's wedding dress, which she had planned to wear for her own ceremony, along with the small silver hairbrush that had been her grandmother's. The only photographs of her family, letters from her childhood friend, and every stitch of clothing she owned except what she wore now. Jackson Forrester seemed to understand the depth of her loss. Without a word, he removed his coat and placed it around her shoulders. The garment was warm from his body and smelled of leather, horses, and pine. "The stagecoach men will likely head to Timber Creek for help. We should do the same," he said. "Can you ride, Miss Grayson?" "Yes, though it's been some time." He nodded and led her to his horse, a tall chestnut gelding with intelligent eyes. "This is Rusty. He's steady as they come." With surprising gentleness for such a large man, he helped her mount, then swung up behind her. Dorothea stiffened at the impropriety of their position, but there was no alternative. As Jackson urged the horse forward, she found herself leaning against his solid chest, drawing warmth and strange comfort from this stranger who had appeared like a guardian angel in her darkest moment. "Thank you, Mr. Forrester," she whispered. "Just Jackson, miss." His breath stirred the loose tendrils of hair near her ear. "And there's no need for thanks. Out here we help each other. It's the only way to survive." The journey to Timber Creek took nearly an hour, with Jackson keeping the horse at a steady pace to avoid jostling his passenger. As they rode, he pointed out landmarks: a distinctive rock formation, the distant silhouette of mountains, a hawk circling overhead, his deep voice a soothing counterpoint to the rhythm of hoofbeats. Timber Creek proved to be smaller than Dorothea had imagined. A single dusty street lined with wooden buildings, a church steeple visible at one end, and a two-story structure with a sign identifying it as the Timber Creek Hotel and Mercantile. Several horses were hitched outside what appeared to be a saloon, and a few people moved along the boardwalks as the day's business concluded. Jackson steered Rusty toward the hotel, where a plump woman in an apron was sweeping the porch. She looked up as they approached, her eyes widening. "Jackson Forrester, what brings you to town on a Thursday?" Her gaze shifted to Dorothea. "And who might this bedraggled creature be?" "Mrs. Murphy, this is Miss Dorothea Grayson. There was an accident at the Blackwater crossing. Stagecoach tried to ford when the river was too high." Miss Grayson lost all her belongings. The woman's expression softened immediately. "Oh, you poor dear. Come inside at once." She hurried down the steps as Jackson dismounted and helped Dorothea down. Her legs nearly buckled as she touched the ground, and Jackson steadied her with a hand at her elbow. "She's had quite a shock, Mrs. Murphy. She'll need a room and some dry clothes." Of course." Mrs. Murphy took Dorothea's arm, clucking sympathetically. "We'll get you sorted right away, miss." Dorothea turned to Jackson. "I don't know how to thank you." "No need. I'll see to it that word gets to Whitfield about what happened and your delay." He replaced his hat and touched the brim. "Mrs. Murphy will take good care of you." Before Dorothea could say more, he had remounted and ridden toward the other end of town. Mrs. Murphy guided her up the steps and into the hotel's small lobby. "Now then, let's get you a hot bath and some tea. I'm Harriet Murphy. I own this establishment with my husband George." She assessed Dorothea with kind eyes. "You're about my daughter's size. She's married and living in Denver now, but I kept some of her things. They'll do until we can get you properly outfitted." "You're too kind," Dorothea murmured, feeling overwhelmed by the woman's generosity. "Nonsense. We look after our own here. You said you're Miss Grayson. Are you passing through or staying?" Dorothea swallowed hard. "I've come to marry Thomas Whitfield. We've been corresponding for 6 months." Mrs. Murphy's expression changed subtly. "I see. Well, that's fine. He's a hard-working man, Thomas is." She bustled toward the stairs. "Come along now. That bath won't draw itself." Later, soaking in a copper tub behind a screen in a small but clean room on the second floor, Dorothea allowed herself to truly weep for the first time. The hot water soothed her tired body, but nothing could ease the hollow ache in her chest. She had lost so much, not just possessions, but tangible connections to her past, to her family. When she emerged, dressed in a borrowed nightgown and wrapper, she found Mrs. Murphy had left a tray with tea and sandwiches. A note beside it informed her that the stagecoach men had arrived in town and confirmed the loss of all passenger luggage. They would resume the journey to the Whitfield ranch the following afternoon. Dorothea sat by the window, sipping tea and watching as darkness fell over Timber Creek. Across the street, the saloon came alive with light and the faint sounds of a piano. A few cowboys entered and exited, their spurs jingling. This world was so different from Boston, rawer, wilder, both frightening and strangely exhilarating. Her thoughts drifted to Jackson Forrester, to the quiet strength he had shown and the kindness in those blue eyes. Then she firmly redirected her mind to Thomas Whitfield, her fiancé, the man she had promised to marry. She retrieved his letters from her reticule and reread them by lamplight, trying to recapture the hopeful feelings that had led her to accept his proposal. Morning brought bright sunshine and a knock at her door. Mrs. Murphy entered with a bundle of clothing and news. Mr. Whitfield sent word. He can't come to town until next week, something about a sick cow and a fence that needs mending. She laid the clothes on the bed. But Mr. Forrester stopped by again. He's offered to take you to his ranch until Whitfield can come for you. Says his sister's visiting from Bozeman and would welcome the company. Dorothea felt both relief and apprehension. That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to impose. Nonsense. Jackson Forrester is one of the finest men in these parts. His ranch is successful, and that sister of his, Eliza, is a delight. You'd be comfortable there. Mrs. Murphy hesitated. Truth be told, it might be better than waiting here. The hotel gets rowdy on weekends with cowboys coming in from the outlying ranches. An hour later, dressed in a borrowed blue calico dress and a shawl, Dorothea stood outside the hotel with Mrs. Murphy, waiting for Jackson. The mercantile owner, Mr. Peterson, had assembled a small package for her: a hairbrush, some ribbons, a nightgown, and other necessities, and refused payment. "Consider it a wedding gift, Miss Grayson," he said with a smile. "We're glad to have another fine lady settling in our community." Jackson arrived driving a wagon rather than riding horseback. He tipped his hat to the ladies, his eyes lingering on Dorothea. "Miss Grayson, you're looking better today, thanks to Mrs. Murphy's kindness." Dorothea smiled at the older woman. "I don't know how I'll ever repay everyone's generosity." "By being happy here," Mrs. Murphy said firmly. "That's payment enough." Jackson helped Dorothea up to the wagon seat. "My sister's eager to meet you. Been out here 6 years and she still misses female company." The journey to the Forrester ranch revealed the beauty of the Montana landscape. Rolling hills covered with spring grass gave way to stands of pine and aspen. Wildflowers dotted the meadows, and in the distance, snow-capped mountains stood sentinel against the blue sky. Jackson pointed out features of the land, naming plants and animals, explaining how the territory had changed since he'd arrived 10 years earlier as a 16-year-old boy with nothing but dreams and determination. "My father was a drunk in Missouri," he said matter-of-factly. "Mother died when I was 12. I worked odd jobs, saved every penny, then headed west. Worked as a ranch hand for 4 years before homesteading. Started with 10 cows and a broken-down cabin." He gestured toward a rise ahead. "Now I've got 300 head in that." As they crested the hill, Dorothea gasped. Below them lay a picturesque valley with a creek winding through it. A substantial log house stood near a cluster of outbuildings, smoke rising from the chimney. Corrals held horses, and in the distance, cattle grazed on the lush grass. "It's beautiful," she said sincerely. Jackson's face softened with pride. "It's home." As they approached the house, a woman emerged onto the porch, tall like Jackson, with the same striking blue eyes, her brown hair pulled back in a simple knot. She waved enthusiastically. "You must be Miss Grayson. I'm Eliza Forrester Matthews. Welcome to Pinewood Ranch." She hurried down to help Dorothea from the wagon. Jackson told me everything. I'm so sorry about your things, but you're safe now, and that's what matters. Dorothea found herself enveloped in a warm hug before being ushered into the house. The interior was surprisingly comfortable, with polished wooden floors, colorful rugs, and sturdy furniture. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with volumes that made Dorothea's heart lift. A piano stood in one corner, unexpected in this frontier setting. My brother insisted on hauling that thing all the way from Denver, Eliza explained, following Dorothea's gaze. Said a real home needs music. Do you play? Yes, I do, Dorothea admitted. It was one of the few accomplishments my mother insisted upon. Wonderful. Then you must play for us after supper. Eliza linked her arm through Dorothea's. Come, let me show you to your room. You'll stay in my daughter's. She's with my husband in Bozeman, where he runs the newspaper. I'm just visiting for a month to help Jackson with the spring calving. The room was small but charming, with a handmade quilt on the bed and curtains at the window that overlooked the valley. A handsome chest of drawers and a washstand completed the furnishings. I've put some of my things in the drawer for you to use, Eliza said. We're of a similar size, I think, though you're more delicate than I am. Dorothea blinked back tears at this new kindness. I don't know what to say. Everyone has been so good to me. Eliza squeezed her hand. The West can be harsh, but the people who survive here learn quickly that generosity isn't optional, it's essential. Now, wash up and rest if you like. Supper will be ready in about an hour. Left alone, Dorothea sat on the bed, overwhelmed by the events of the past 24 hours. Yesterday morning, she had been on the stagecoach, nervous but excited about meeting her future husband. Now she was in the home of a stranger, a compelling, kind stranger, whose blue eyes seemed to see straight through to her soul. She took out Thomas Whitfield's letters and read them again, trying to reconnect with the man she had agreed to marry. His words were practical, straightforward, describing his ranch, his needs, his expectations of a wife. There was little poetry in them, but she had appreciated his honesty. Yet now, compared to the warmth she had experienced from the Forresters, the letters seemed oddly cold. Supper was a lively affair. Jackson's ranch hands, two weathered cowboys named Pete and Sam, joined them at the long table, treating Dorothea with awkward courtesy. The food was simple but delicious. Roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and an apple pie that Eliza had baked that afternoon. The conversation flowed easily, with Eliza drawing out Dorothea's story, how she had been working as a schoolteacher in Boston after her parents died of influenza, how the prospect of marrying a distant cousin to secure her future had driven her to answer Thomas Whitfield's advertisement. Thomas is reserved, Eliza said carefully, but he runs a good ranch, smaller than this one but respectable. Have you met him often? Dorothea asked. Jackson and Eliza exchanged glances. We see him at town meetings and such, Jackson replied. He keeps to himself mostly. After the meal, as promised, Dorothea played the piano. Her fingers were rusty at first, but soon she lost herself in Mozart and Chopin, then transitioned to folk songs that had everyone singing along. When she finally stopped, she turned to find Jackson watching her with an expression that made her heart beat faster. You play beautifully, he said quietly. The days that followed fell into a pleasant rhythm. While Jackson worked with the cattle and horses, Eliza showed Dorothea around the ranch. They gathered eggs from the henhouse, tended the vegetable garden, and baked bread in the large kitchen. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson. Thomas Whitfield sent no further word. When Dorothea expressed concern on the third day, Jackson saddled up and rode to Timber Creek to inquire. He returned with news that Whitfield had extended his regrets, but was still detained by ranch matters. "He says he'll come next week," Jackson reported, not meeting Dorothea's eyes. On the fourth morning, Dorothea woke early and found Jackson already at work in the corral, training a young horse. She watched from the fence as he moved with confident grace, speaking softly to the nervous animal, his hands gentle but firm. "He's good with them, isn't he?" Eliza appeared beside her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. She passed one to Dorothea. "Jackson has a way with creatures that are afraid, always has. He was kind to me when I was at my lowest," Dorothea admitted. "I'll never forget that." Eliza studied her over the rim of her cup. "You know, I've been thinking. We're about the same size, and I have plenty of dresses I rarely wear anymore. My husband prefers me in the latest fashions when we go to social events in Bozeman. You're welcome to have them." "Oh, I couldn't possibly." "You can and you will," Eliza insisted. "What are you going to do? Get married in borrowed clothes?" The mention of her impending marriage sent a strange pang through Dorothea's heart. She looked back at Jackson, who had succeeded in getting the young horse to accept a saddle. "Tell me about Mr. Whitfield," she said suddenly. "Please be honest," Eliza sighed. "Thomas is 43, a widower for 12 years. His first wife died in childbirth along with the baby. He's strict in his ways, keeps his ranch running well enough but has few friends, goes to church every Sunday, pays his debts." She hesitated. "He's not a bad man, Dorothea, just hardened by life. And does he ever smile, laugh, play music?" The questions escaped before Dorothea could stop them. "I've never heard him laugh," Eliza admitted, "but perhaps he simply needs the right companion to bring joy back into his life." That afternoon, a storm rolled in from the mountains, bringing thunder and lightning that frightened the horses and sent everyone running for shelter. Dorothea found herself alone in the house with Jackson when Eliza rode out to help the ranch hands secure a broken fence before the worst of the rain hit. They worked together to close windows and bring in firewood. When lightning struck nearby, sending a deafening crack of thunder through the house, Dorothea jumped and dropped the stack of kindling she was carrying. Jackson was beside her instantly, helping her gather the scattered wood. Their hands met over a piece of pine, and Dorothea felt a jolt that had nothing to do with the lightning outside. She looked up to find his blue eyes fixed on her face. "You're trembling," he said softly. "I've always been afraid of storms," she admitted. He smiled, a warm, genuine smile that transformed his face. "My mother used to say thunder was just the angels moving furniture in heaven." Dorothea laughed, and something shifted between them. As the rain pounded on the roof, they sat before the fireplace, talking. Jackson told her about his dreams for the ranch, about the books he read late at night, about the time he'd spent living with a Crow family who had taught him to track and hunt when he first came to Montana. In turn, Dorothea shared stories of Boston, of teaching children to raid, of her love for music and art. She found herself telling him things she had never told anyone: her fears, her hopes, the crushing loneliness she had felt after her parents died. "Is that why you agreed to marry a stranger?" Jackson asked, his voice gentle. "Loneliness, partly," she admitted, "and partly practicality. I had little money left and few options for a woman alone." She twisted her hands in her lap. Thomas Whitfield's letters were straightforward. He needed a wife to cook and keep house, to help with the ranch accounts, perhaps to give him children. I needed security, a place to belong. "And love?" Jackson's question hung in the air between them. "Did you hope for that too?" Dorothea met his gaze steadily. "I hoped we might develop affection over time. Many successful marriages begin that way, and many don't." Jackson stood abruptly and moved to the window. The storm was beginning to abate, the rain softening to a gentle patter. Whitfield is a hard man, Dorothea, set in his ways. He works from sunrise to sunset and expects the same from those around him. There's no music in his house, no books except the Bible and a ledger. You make him sound quite grim, Dorothea said, trying to keep her tone light. Jackson turned to face her, his expression serious. I'm telling you what I know to be true. You deserve more. Before she could respond, the door burst open and Eliza rushed in, soaked to the skin but grinning. The fence is secure and we didn't lose a single calf. Oh my, I need to change before I catch my death. She hurried toward her room, leaving puddles on the floor. The moment between Dorothea and Jackson had shattered, but something had changed. That night, as she lay in bed listening to the last raindrops on the roof, Dorothea faced an uncomfortable truth. She was developing feelings for Jackson, Forrester, feelings that went far beyond gratitude. The next morning brought sunshine and clarity. Dorothea rose early and found Eliza in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. I need to go to town, Dorothea announced. I must send a letter to Mr. Whitfield. Eliza raised an eyebrow. Oh, and what will this letter say? Dorothea took a deep breath. That I cannot in good conscience proceed with our arrangement, that I am not the wife he needs. I see. Eliza wiped her hands on her apron. And does this decision have anything to do with my brother? It would be dishonest to say no, Dorothea admitted. But primarily, it's about being true to myself. I came west seeking security, but I realize now I want more from life, more from marriage. Mr. Whitfield deserves someone who enters the union with a whole heart. Eliza studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Jackson's planning to go to town this morning. I'm sure he'd be happy to take you. The ride to Timber Creek was charged with unspoken words. Jackson seemed distracted, his usual easy conversation replaced by long silences. When they reached town, he helped Dorothea down from the wagon. I have business at the bank, he said. Will an hour be enough time for what you need to do? Yes, that should be sufficient. Dorothea straightened her borrowed bonnet. Thank you, Jackson. He nodded curtly and strode away. Dorothea watched him go, confusion mingling with the certainty of her decision. She made her way to the post office, where she wrote a respectful but firm letter to Thomas Whitfield, releasing him from their agreement and apologizing for any inconvenience. As she sealed the envelope, the door opened, and Thomas Whitfield himself entered. Dorothea recognized him from Eliza's description, a tall, lean man with graying hair and a severe expression. His clothes were practical and well-worn, his hands calloused from years of ranch work. Miss Grayson, he said, removing his hat. I'm Thomas Whitfield. I was just coming to town to see you. Dorothea rose, letter in hand. Mr. Whitfield, I was just writing to you. He glanced at the envelope, his expression unreadable. I see. Perhaps we should speak privately. They moved to a bench outside the post office. Dorothea gathered her courage and explained her decision. Whitfield listened without interruption, his weathered face impassive. When she finished, he sighed. I appreciate your honesty, Miss Grayson. Truth be told, I've been having second thoughts myself. He looked down at his hands. My first wife, Sarah, she was much like you, gentle, educated, fond of music. She was miserable on the ranch, though she tried to hide it, when she died. He shook his head. I've been alone a long time. Perhaps too long. Dorothea felt a wave of compassion for this solitary man. I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Whitfield. Thank you. He stood, settling his hat back on his head. I wish you well, Miss Grayson. I hope you find what you're looking for. And you, Mr. Whitfield. As he walked away, Dorothea felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had done the right thing. Now she just needed to figure out what came next. She found Jackson emerging from the bank, his expression troubled. Is everything all right? She asked. He seemed startled to see her. "Yes, just some business matters. Did you accomplish what you needed to?" "I did. I spoke with Mr. Whitfield. We have agreed to dissolve our arrangement." Jackson's eyes widened. "Whitfield was here, and you're not going to marry him?" "No." Dorothea met his gaze steadily. "It wouldn't have been fair to either of us." A complex mix of emotions crossed Jackson's face. "I see. And now, what will you do now, Dorothea?" "I'm not entirely sure. Mrs. Murphy mentioned the school in Timber Creek needs a teacher. Perhaps I could apply." Jackson nodded slowly. "That's a good plan. You'd be an excellent teacher." He helped her into the wagon, his manner strangely formal. "We should head back. Storm clouds are gathering again." The return journey was even quieter than the trip to town. As they approached the ranch, raindrops began to fall, and by the time they reached the house, a steady downpour had commenced. They ran for the porch, laughing despite the tension between them. Eliza met them at the door with towels. "You two are soaked, Dorothea. Go change before you catch cold." "Jackson, there's coffee on the stove." Dorothea retreated to her room, her emotions in turmoil. She had broken her engagement, effectively stranding herself in a foreign land with few resources. Yet she felt strangely liberated, as if she had escaped a cage before the door had even closed. She changed into dry clothes and was brushing her hair when a knock came at her door. She opened it to find Jackson standing there, still in his wet shirt, his hair damp and tousled. "I need to tell you something," he said without preamble. "The bank's foreclosing on Whitfield's ranch. That's why he couldn't come for you earlier. He's been trying to secure a loan to save the property." Dorothea gasped. "That's terrible. Is there nothing to be done?" "It's too late. He's been struggling for years, apparently. The drought 2 summers ago, then losing half his herd to disease last winter." Jackson shook his head. "The point is, if you had married him, you would have walked into financial ruin. I wanted you to know that your decision was sound, even beyond personal considerations." "Thank you for telling me." Dorothea studied his face. "But that's not really why you came to my door, is it, Jackson?" He looked away, then back at her, his blue eyes intense. "No, I came to tell you that I understand if you want to return east. I can arrange passage. But I also came to say that He faltered, then squared his shoulders. "I've fallen in love with you, Dorothea Grayson. I know it's too soon, I know we've only just met, but sometimes a man just knows." Dorothea's heart raced. "Jackson, please let me finish. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that if you decided to stay in Timber Creek, to take that teaching position, I'd court you properly. I'd give you time. And if someday you felt you could care for me too." He trailed off, looking suddenly vulnerable. Dorothea stepped closer to him. "I'm not going back east, Jackson." Hope flickered in his eyes. "No, no, my life is here now." She took a deep breath. "When I lost everything in that river, I thought my future had been swept away too, but you found me. You dried my tears. And somehow, in these few days, you've shown me possibilities I never imagined." Jackson's hand came up to touch her cheek gently. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying I'd like to stay in Montana. I'd like to teach at the Timber Creek School." She smiled up at him. "And I'd very much like to be courted by Jackson Forrester." His answering smile was radiant. "Miss Grayson, would you do me the honor of accompanying me to the Founders' Day dance in Timber Creek next Saturday?" "I'd be delighted, Mr. Forrester." She laughed softly. "Though I have nothing suitable to wear." "I think Eliza might have some ideas about that," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "May I?" She nodded, and he leaned down to place a gentle kiss on her lips. It was brief, respectful, but filled with promise. From the doorway came the sound of a throat clearing. They turned to find Eliza watching them, her expression a mixture of amusement and approval. "Well, it's about time," she said. Now, if you two are quite finished, supper's getting cold." 6 months later, on a crisp autumn day with golden leaves falling from the aspens, Dorothea Grayson became Dorothea Forrester in a ceremony at the Timber Creek Church. She wore a dress of ivory silk that Eliza had helped her make, with lace collar and cuffs sent by her friend in Boston. Jackson, handsome in a new suit, watched her walk down the aisle with wonder in his eyes. The schoolhouse where Dorothea taught had given her a week's holiday for her honeymoon, which the newlyweds spent at the ranch, planning their future together. They would build an addition to the house in the spring, a music room with large windows to catch the morning light. On their wedding night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness, Jackson held her close and whispered, "When I found you by the river that day, I never imagined I was finding my heart." Dorothea traced the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. Sometimes we have to lose everything to find what truly matters. 5 years later, the Forrester ranch had prospered beyond their wildest dreams. Dorothea still taught at the Timber Creek School 3 days a week, bringing their 4-year-old daughter Emma with her. Their 2-year-old son, Matthew, stayed home with his father, already showing a keen interest in horses and cattle. Thomas Whitfield had moved to Oregon after losing his ranch, finding work managing a logging operation. He occasionally sent letters, which suggested he had found contentment in his new life. Eliza and her husband had moved permanently to Bozeman, where their newspaper had become the largest in the territory. They visited often, bringing books and news from the expanding world beyond the valley. On the anniversary of the day they met, Jackson and Dorothea always rode to the Blackwater River. They would stand on the bank, watching the current that had carried away her possessions but ultimately delivered her to where she belonged. "You ever regret it?" Jackson asked one such afternoon, his arm around her waist as they gazed at the water. "Losing everything you brought from your old life?" Dorothea looked up at him, at the face that had become more dear to her than she could have imagined possible that desperate day 5 years ago. "How could I regret the loss that led me to you? The river took my past, Jackson, but you gave me my future." He kissed her then, under the big Montana sky, as the river rushed onward, carrying other stories, other possibilities, to places yet unknown.